a Republican candidate for governor in Michigan just revealed how extreme her views on abortion really are. When asked about cases of rape and incest, Tudor Dixon, not Nixon, insisted that this was a perfect example of a situation in which she would be in favor of not supporting access to abortion, preventing that person from receiving that care. Let's watch.
They asked you rape, incest, or the health of the mother. You said no exceptions. Do you
health of the mother and life of the mother are different.
Okay, well, that's true. Rape, incest, no exceptions except
life of the mother.
Is that you're solid there?
That's where I'm solid.
Okay. The question would be like a 14-year-old who, let's say, is a victim of abuse by an uncle.
Yeah.
You're saying carry that.
Do you? Okay.
Yes or no? But I will listen to yes or no, and then give me the answer.
Because I know people who are the product. I'd life is a life for me. That's how it is.
Okay.
That is for me. That's my feeling.
Dixon was asked to clarify why she thinks the case of a teenager who was raped is the quote perfect example of her belief that abortion should be illegal except in cases where a mother's life is at risk. And what she said was, not everyone agrees with me that every life has value, and we should have the courage, as the University of Michigan football coach Jim Harbaugh put it, to let unborn children be born. I know that, I'm not hiding from it. The Michigan Democratic Party immediately released a statement condemning Dixon's remarks. Tudor Dixon has now gone so far in her radical anti-choice crusade as to say that a child who is the victim of incestual rape is the perfect example of why abortion should be banned outright in Michigan. Her callous remarks are the perfect example of how dangerous Tudor Dixon would be for Michigan families. And unfortunately, the state of Michigan has a draconian view that is very similar to Dixon's. Dixon's support for the abortion ban that includes only an exception for cases when a mother's life is in danger is consistent with Michigan's 1931 law banning abortion. The Supreme Court's Roe versus Wade decision in 1973, which made abortion a federal right, effectively overrode that old law, HuffPost reporting. But the court's June decision, sending the issue of abortion back to the states, would have triggered the 1931 ban had a Michigan judge not granted Planned Parenthood's request for a temporary injunction, blocking the law from taking effect on the grounds that it violates the state's constitution. Now, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who Dixon is challenging with her campaign, has filed a second lawsuit challenging the restoration of the 1931 law in court. And even so, if Whitmer succeeds in stopping the 1931 law from taking effect, the state will continue to have a number of abortion restrictions still on the books. Those restrictions include requiring a minor to obtain consent from a parent to receive an abortion, and a prohibition on abortions after the point of fetal viability. But last week, the state did take one promising action in addition to those injunctions. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed an executive order refusing to extradite people who come to the state for reproductive health care. The order also protects abortion providers in Michigan who will not have to fear being extradited for prosecution in another state offering reproductive health care. According to the polls, Tudor Dixon, the person who said that cases of rape and incest are perfect examples of why we need an abortion ban, she's leading that primary race out in Michigan for the Republican spot and is likely to face off against Governor Whitmer come November. Cenk, what do you make of all of this?
So look, we now have very clear choices. And so in the old days, pre-Trump, you really didn't have much of a choice in a general election. In primaries, you always had choices. But in general elections, you'd get a corporate Democrat versus a corporate Republican. They would both pretend on social issues, and then they would both agree to give giant corporate tax cuts and deregulation and do all the standard things that their donors wanted. Now, there's still an enormous difference between progressives and corporate Democrats. But in general elections, we now have a very clear difference between any Democrat and Republicans. So This is not theoretical anymore. Before, I don't know if it was Republican women voters or Republicans that just wanted the tax cuts and were greedy, comforted themselves with, well, the Republican Party's not really gonna do any of that. It's all theoretical. All they're gonna do is give me the tax cuts, and they're huffing and puffing about the other stuff. No, they're not. No, so she just said, 14-year-old getting raped, we're gonna force her to have the rapist baby. And I think it's a perfect example of what we should do. If you vote for her in Michigan, she's gonna reverse Whitmer's executive order and probably drop the lawsuit. I don't know if it'll be resolved before then. If it isn't, if she drops the lawsuit, yes. If you're raped or you suffered incest in Michigan, even though it's a purplish state, it used to be blue, but the Republicans have done an amazing job of gerrymandering at the local level. The idiot Democrats have done nothing in return. So you can tell I'm not a big fan of the overall Democratic Party, but is there a difference? Hell yes, there's a difference. Whitmer's trying to protect women, keep reproductive rights, and the Republicans are insane. I mean, saying a 14-year-old should be forced to deliver her rapist child is nuts. A very tiny percentage of Americans agree with that, but unfortunately, almost every Republican politician agrees with that.
Right. Yeah. I think it's crazy that she's using this language of, I know people who are the product of this, and every life has value. Because what is being proposed here, and calling it a perfect example at that, is forced pregnancy, which is against international human rights law. It's considered a war crime, especially in cases where it's done for the purpose of adjusting the racial makeup of the nation. And there have been a lot of rants by members of the far right saying that we need to increase, the population of people in the United States. They're really preaching white replacement theory, complaining that we've had an influx of immigrants who are not white and a reduction of births in people who are white. And so much so that research pointing this out was cited in the original leaked majority opinion about having a shortage of the domestic supply of infants, and even people like Elon Musk pointing out that we're not having enough babies in the West globally. It's really concerning. Like, we are teetering on the line of having severe human rights violations, and to call this the perfect example almost suggests that she expects this to happen quite frequently, given the abortion ban going into effect in Michigan. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and guys, to the point about how it's not theoretical, they're already stopping perfectly rational procedures all across the country. Just a couple of days ago, we told you about now they're afraid to remove an embryo that is in the fallopian tubes. Well, that's not where it goes, and that doesn't lead to a pregnancy that could produce a live human being. It has to be in the uterus. And they're like, no, don't care. We're Republicans. Make her carry it. That's insane. That's just literally. There was a woman who had to carry around. She had a miscarriage inside, and the baby was already dead. I mean, I hate saying it that way. These are really like gut wrenching conversations, and they told her no, carry it inside you for 2 weeks. She could have gotten an infection, organ failure. She could have died. They don't care about her. In Wisconsin, a woman was bleeding for 10 days straight because they wouldn't remove fetal matter after she'd already had a miscarriage. So it's happening. It's happening right now. So if you vote for a Republican, they're gonna take away your rights and they're gonna empower monsters. Look, I mentioned this in the last time we talked about it. I'll say one more time here. Imagine that there's a terrible guy who wants to not only rape a woman that he doesn't, because rape's about power, a woman he doesn't like. And then he lives in a red state and he thinks, that's great. Now she's gonna have to carry it the whole time. And I'm gonna get her to carry my baby and maybe even raise it. And the Republicans go, oh, great job. Okay, we'll help you to oppress that woman for the rest of her life. It's really disgusting. You ought to have your head examined if you're voting for Republicans.
Right, and what Cenk is pointing out here is super important because it seems straightforward to say the one exception is when a woman's life is in danger. That's actually not so straightforward. What is the risk of death that the circumstances of pregnancy have to be for the abortion to then be legal? Does she have to be, bleeding out in a hospital? Does it have to be an ectopic pregnancy where there's a high chance of death? What is the likelihood of death? Who makes that determination? What the likelihood of death is? Because that's always uncertain. I'm sure there are many doctors that wouldn't even be comfortable putting a percentage or a probability on that. And then who makes the determination whether or not the abortion was legal after that? It's a huge gray area and it sounds straightforward, but it's really not.
Yeah, what is straightforward is helping rapists and forcing women to undergo. And by the way, not just women, children. These are the people that claimed, oh my God, we care so much about children and the Democrats are hurting the kids. Now they're like, oh, you're 14 years old? Good luck. We're gonna make you have a pregnancy. And then when you're delivering it, it might kill you. Or you can do a C-section and we're gonna take your guts out, but all in service of the rapist zygote, because it's way more valuable than a woman's life. And that's disgusting.
Yeah, we're gonna get into this story a little bit later in the show, but we know that right-wing extremists in the United States are willing to develop manifestos about white replacement theory and kill immigrants and target members of the Black community. They're willing to kill people in mass because they want to live in a white Christian nationalist country. And now this is opening up a whole nother door where to contribute to ensuring that white people are the majority in the country, they could start raping women and forcing them to have babies in these states. If they're willing to kill people with assault rifles, I would bet that they're willing to do this. And the discourse on the internet following the Ohio story is already descending into that.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.